the way that you've been talking, if I understand correctly, about your work with Celtic Futurism is that it does similar kind of work in the sense of opening up an understanding of time, so that when we can sort of look at history as something much more than something static that happened centuries ago, but something that is fluid, something that in fact you can turn to once again for inspiration now and perhaps into the future. You can actually become a time traveler in some sense by your experience with these kinds of works. And so, if I understand what you're trying to think about in some sense with Irish science fiction or with Celtic futurism, is this kind of opening up of history and its possibilities, so that we don't have to think that we are simply stuck always in the present, or that the future has no definitive characteristics. We can actually imagine building something much different than our future, perhaps by drawing on our past, but definitely through a creative act of imagining something new.
Oh no, no, exactly, and that's where I kind of, I'd be exactly that, and that's the kind of the reason why I like Jacques Rancière's work so much is because he refuses disciplinary boundaries.
Mm.
In Rancière's work, he kind of refuses to say or refuses to kind of rule out the relationship of facts and fiction. Refuses to kind of say, here's history and there's the fiction, and never the two shall meet. He
Yeah.
refuses that kind of idea and sees them, well, actually, what happens when we play with those kind of ideas? And that's where, like you were talking about with the history being open, and with thinking about history in an open manner or imagining these kind of things, that's where I kind of see this being so important about the
Mm.
imagination, and about that being egalitarian, and about what people come up with can be a practice of equality, can prove kind of equality in that kind of sense. It can demonstrate equality rather than being, well, this is, we believe in equality.
Yeah.
Because there's so much of our societies and so much of the past has been shaped by rhetoric, essentially about equality. Rhetoric about that, well, we're all equal and that this is egalitarian, when we know fine rightly it's not. It's unequal, it's dominated, it's sexist, it's racist, it's homophobic. It's shaped by these universalisms that aren't universal.
Mm.
Whereas when we then begin to think about these kind of ideas, and like that's where the fantasy I was saying about earlier on as well, I think is very important about these kind of things, because I've kind of realized that, yeah, if we think facts are just facts, well, what happens when we play with the idea about factual kind of representation? What happens when we create a world, like in George R. R. Martin's work, for example, we create a world where it has a really deep history, it has lots of genealogies and descents of different people. What happens when we think about fiction as being facts in that sense, and we use factual ideas? We use the approach to history as a fact, as a history, as a linear progression, but we play with that.
Yeah.
We think about, well, what happens if this had gone differently, or what happens if, and fundamentally with the time that we're talking about, and with the ideas of history that we're talking about, it isn't definitively proven that there aren't alternative universes. It isn't definitively proven that there aren't other intelligences out there. It isn't definitively proven, for example, that we don't know that artificial intelligence is already intelligent. Because if it was intelligent, would it even tell us? I don't know that it would. If you had become intelligent and you had woken up in this world, you'd screamed into existence in this world, would you actually tell your creator that you'd woken up? You probably wouldn't. I don't think you would. You probably would stay quiet about it, and hope that nobody noticed. So that's where I think it is that egalitarian aspect. I mean, that's one of the most important things I've noticed about reading history, is that you find and you come across people in history like that who are out of time, who are untimely, who want equality, who want a different world, who want to practice that, who want to see it. And no matter who that is, there's lots of examples of it. I mean, that's where, like, Frederick Douglass, for example, I always find it fascinating that Frederick Douglass came to Ireland, and visited here. Was actually that kind of saw it as somewhere that was in sympathy to what he was struggling for as well. That it was a victim as well of this world that we lived in, and that's where I was saying about the Irish kind of history of being victims. there is a strong history of that because Ireland has been a victim of colonialism and imperialism in that sense as well.
That's fascinating. Yeah. Well, this is more conversation to go for.